Welcome to a self-published author's diary. I am Elodie Novodatsky. I write about first times, second chances, things that scare the crap out of me, and things that make me laugh out loud. I'll be speaking with you and sharing my adventures in self-publishing, the behind the scenes of writing, and the business side of it. And before we get started today, a small message from our sponsor, Anchor. Thanks for listening. Good evening, or rather, good morning, good afternoon, hello. I have just recorded an introduction that I deleted because it was pretty long, and I will be recording an episode for this Tuesday. A shorter one, but I still will record an episode for this Tuesday, so I have decided to keep this introduction short. And now I've lost my train of thought. Today on the podcast, I am very, very happy to welcome Megan Carter. Megan is a London-based actor from Kansas City, USA. She received her MA in classical acting from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. She also holds a BA in theater from Loyola University Chicago with minors in musical theater, dance, and Shakespeare studies. With her strong musical theater and dance background, Megan especially loves theater that is highly physical and that involves lots of movements and stage combat. She's passionate about bringing classical works to contemporary audiences in a way that allows people to feel like they have a place in the story and a way to connect to it. When not working, Megan enjoys reading, running, and practicing yoga. She loves a good road trip and has been on 101 roller coasters. And yes, I will ask her about those roller coasters. Megan is also the narrator of Fear Me, Fear Me Not, See Me, See Me Not, and A Summer Like No Other, which are my books. And I will share little excerpts from those books right now.
Chapter 2. Aaron. Here's what we all know. Sometime this week, or the next, or the one after that, we will find another dead girl. Every year a girl disappears, and every year she's found dead with an angel wing carved into her cheek. And this year is no different. Chapter 1. M. The pop music blasts from the speakers so loudly that it resonates within me. I jump once, twice, 3 times with my fist in the air, and then my hips move to the pounding rhythm. Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling. From glen to glen and down the mountainside.
Megan also writes, and today we will be talking about how acting might feed her writing, and we also talk about roller coasters. Yes, we do. And about critic partners and so many other things. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Megan. I am running a giveaway for one of my and Megan's audiobooks, and so you could win a copy of the audiobook of Fear Me, Fear Me Not, or See Me, See Me Not, or A Summer Like No Other. You can head over to my website, www.elodienovodatsky.com. Novodatsky is Nowodzkij. And the link is also on this episode's description. And just a very quick update on my revision. It's at a standstill because I just finished recording the audiobook I had gotten hired for, and that has taken all of my time. So I am very excited because I've pressed send today on that particular assignment, and that means that starting tomorrow I will be refocusing entirely on my revision. In addition, I've also started, and that's what I will talk about more on Tuesday, is that I have started rebranding the Gathered City series. Maybe not. This is where I'm currently at. I have one cover that I've redesigned, and I'm going to test the waters with my newsletter subscribers. Again, I'll get into more details about that on Tuesday. But in the meantime, if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, do not hesitate to do so at www.elodinoworadsky.com. There is a Get Updates tab. If you click on that, you will get access to the little form where you can add your email and your first name, I think, and your last name, but you don't have to put your last name. Anyways, it's also in this episode's description. And now, without any further ado, please welcome Megan Carter to the podcast. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Elodie.
How are you doing? So everybody, this is Megan.
Hi, I'm great. Hi, everyone. Hi, Elodie. I'm fantastic.
So you're currently in London, right?
I am in London. It's 6 p.m. on a rainy Monday.
Can you please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? And I've read on the bio on your website, and I mean, as I've said before, I mean, basically later, because we're recording this on the 17th of May, and I'm going to do the introduction probably in a few days. So in terms of time wrap, it's a bit interesting. But I did read your bio on your website, and the website is megancarter.net. And it says also there that you have been on 101 roller coasters. So as you tell me a little bit about yourself, don't hesitate to elaborate for a few seconds on which roller coaster is the best, if the best means also the scariest or not. Like, let me know.
Okay, so I am from Kansas City in the United States, and I now live in London. I went to university in Chicago, and then I got my master's out here in London at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. So my background is in acting. If you are a listener of Elodie's podcast, you probably know me as her narrator. I've narrated her series, the Gathered City books, and I'm starting on the Em and Nick series as well. Background in stage. Then there was a pandemic, and I stopped being able to, like many other actors, work on stage. And I just bought a microphone because I have actor friends that sort of do narration or voiceover work as a side job in addition to stage or film or whatever it may be. And I had nothing else really going on. So I bought the microphone. I said, I'll give it a try. And I've been narrating for almost a year now. So that's how I know Elodie. I write as well. I'm not published. I've sort of dabbled in stand-up. I've staged plays, one-woman shows, and I've also written, let's say, a novel and a half.
A novel and a half?
Well, yeah, I've done, do you know NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I've done it twice, and the second time I did it, I wrote most of it. I hit my 50,000 word target and then just stopped. But the first time I did it, I finished it. And now that's the novel I'm working on, which I'm sure we'll talk about more. But the roller coaster thing, back to the roller coaster thing. I worked at a theme park in Kansas City called Worlds of Fun. I worked there for years, off and on, like seasonally. And I started working there. I was 18 and I couldn't find a job anywhere else. And I was like, I hated it when I started. I was like, this is so crappy. It's hot. I'm sweaty. And then I realized that people who are into roller coasters are into roller coasters in the same like niche obsessive way that people I knew from theater school were into theater. And it was so interesting to me. And like
That's
anything
interesting.
Yeah, I know. And like they have coaster counts, and there's a website called coastercount.net where you go and like input all the coasters you've been on, and you can see the stats and how many inversions does it have and how tall is it. It's like people are really into it. So then I got really into it.
So I have to know, I mean, I have another question, but first, do you have that in your novel you're currently drafting? Like, is there a roller coaster in it?
Oh no, it's a period piece, but maybe a sort of theme park employee romance is in my future for a future novel.
That sounds good. You've mentioned, I've actually seen like in the three words, which we'll talk about a bit later about writing. You mentioned that that one woman show you just talked about is based on the Greek myth of Medea.
Yeah.
And you said you performed it in workshops. And any chance at all, you can either say a line or two or just explain in a few words what it's about. Because I wrote my first master's thesis on Christa Wolf's Medea. And so when I listened to you a little bit about the three words about writing, and you do a short intro about yourself, and you mentioned the one woman show, and right now you just mentioned the one woman show, and I was just kind of like, oh, what did you do for that one woman show? What did you write? Was it, how long was it? What was?
So it in its final well, I've only performed up to 15 minutes of it. So I got most of the words written, and then my plan sort of pre-pandemic was to work with choreographers and incorporate a lot of movement as well. But I sort of came at it actually from a true crime lens, because my sister and I briefly ran a like weird history / true crime podcast. And what's this woman's name? There is a case in Naperville, a woman, Marilyn Lamaque, I think was her name. And it's like a pattern in true crime of women in divorce killing their children, just like the Greek myth of Medea. And so I came at it from that lens, like this sort of idea of generational pain, and how when a person, the Medea figure in the story, can't deal with their own pain and trauma, how they then just sort of transfer that onto other people if it's not appropriately.
That's fascinating.
It's like there's so many, and I incorporated sort of like mini real news snippets into my one woman show. And it's like, I mean, it's such an old story from ancient Greece, and now it's like, it could be on the 10 o'clock news tonight.
For the Christa Wolf's Medea is like the different approach about was what exactly did Medea do? What, the lens on her as a woman. So like it was a lot of woman studies incorporated into that particular piece. But that's just that's fascinating.
I could talk about it all day.
Hi again, everybody. Sorry, we had a little bit of a technical issue. That's what those things are called. So we were talking about Medea before, but we decided to just move forward with the questions that I have and that are more related to writing and publishing. Even though with Medea, we could also talk about a different interpretation, and, art is also, anyways, I'm going to keep on going. So Megan, are you thinking of using a pen name when it comes to the book you're currently writing? Why and why not?
I think the current book, probably not. There's nothing in it that would make me want to distance it from myself. It's not sort of erotic or anything. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I definitely use a pseudonym when I narrate adult content in books. Yeah. And so there's nothing like that in this. And I'm quite proud of it. And I feel like it sort of fits very in line with my brand of things that I'm interested in, the kind of art that I want to make as an actor as well. And I've thought about eventually narrating it myself, so it'd be good to just have it all under the same name.
All right. So you will go by Megan Carter. And am I saying this right? Or is it, how do you say it?
I say it Carter. Very Midwestern.
We're talking about audiobook and narrator, and you're also an actor. And I was wondering, how does that stage experience and also that acting experience and that writing, because you wrote scripts and you wrote the one woman show and everything, how do you think that's influencing your writing when it comes to writing a novel?
Definitely since starting to narrate audiobooks, I really do read scenes out loud now to myself. If I'm writing, dialogue heavy scene, especially if it's, sort of an intense, like heightened emotion scene, I will just read it out loud to myself to make sure it sounds like things that a person would say.
Yeah. And when it comes to descriptions or anything, or like the way, one thing I struggle with and that I took classes for, and I took classes with Margie Lawson. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's great. I think she's a psychologist. And so she does a lot of approaching with that psychologist lens on writing. And so like visceral reactions and visceral rules, and not only for your characters, but what you want to induce, so to speak, in your readers. And one thing was about, when you're writing the dialogue and right before the person might say, oh, he frowned, or she, smiled, I mean, in more words than I'm currently saying. And sometimes I was having issues with those descriptions that you say right before somebody says something, but that may also give a punch to the. And I was wondering if, as an actor, you may be more attuned to like the body language in your book, because you get sometimes directions for it also in like theater plays and stuff like that, but then you have to actually do it yourself.
That's so interesting. I hadn't ever really thought of it like that. And this is not exactly what you're talking about, but I think I'm happy writing dialogue. I'm happy writing sort of internal descriptions of what my main character is feeling. But as far as like describing the world, describing what a room looks like, I'm so like, I just don't do it. And I don't think that
I
I
think
think
so
it's
too.
fine if you don't do it, but I also think that I could incorporate it more in certain places if I needed to or wanted to. And I don't do that at all. And I wonder if that's because as an actor, I'm more concerned with what am I saying and what am I feeling and what am I, trying to get from another person. And the external world is the set designer's job.
That could very well be. I mean, that definitely sounds, because you're not the one taking care of where the table is going to be, and you're not the one, but you are going to be creating this. And when they're doing it, I think as set designers, they're also trying to make sure that not only it's functional, but also it can have a reaction on the audience, that it's part of the story as well, right? But for you, it's
Exactly.
like, as you said, your reaction, your emotional, what you're trying to portray. So maybe it is linked.
That's so interesting. I never thought about it that way.
I don't know. I was just wondering, because I remember, when I look at movies, and I've discussed that with Leslie and Katie, and like, about watching movies and how we're trying to, sometimes when we write, we have a movie in our head. Is that something that you have as well when you're writing?
Yeah, I definitely have really strong images and like I know what every room my characters are in looks like. And what's funny is I've been working on this novel since 2013 and they've looked the same since then, but I don't describe them.
But it is funny that they look the same, and that you know that they look the same. I think that's actually the most interesting part, is that they look the same.
Yeah, I think like this novel has changed a lot since I initially wrote it, but there's some key images that have stayed the same and those important scenes that are at the heart of it. Like it's in a ballroom. It's been in the same ballroom since I first wrote it in 2013.
That's cool. But did you, and different writers and have different feelings about sharing about their work before it's either completely finished, or either if it's been read by anybody. So, don't overshare if you don't want to, but can you tell me more a little bit about the project you're working on?
Yeah, I don't mind at all.
Okay.
I wrote it in 2013 as part of National Novel Writing Month. I thought I was writing a romance, just a straight up romance, and looking at it again when I had the time in quarantine, I realized I was writing a coming of age story because I was
Okay.
19 when I wrote it.
Yeah.
And so then now I'm only 26. I'm sure I have a lot more coming of age to do. But looking back on it, I was like, this main character thinks that she's ready for her romance when actually she needs to do some soul searching first. So then it had to expand from that end and she had to grow and mature. But basically it's a lesbian coming of age new adult romance set in 1893 in London.
In terms of research for that time period, what did you have to do?
So much. I think it became more and more as initially I dumped the story out and I didn't get too bogged down with research. And then the more revising I've done, the more I realized like, oh, I had them getting on a horse drawn coach. They'd be on a train. So I need to change this. And now they're on a train. Or like the etiquette of, a gentleman caller coming to see you or who sits next to whom at a dinner party. So much research. And some of it might still be wrong. And look, ultimately, at the risk of giving too much away, with a happy sort of lesbian romance where they're probably a bit more accepting than they might have been in 1892. I'm not like, it's not historical in a like detailed sense.
Yeah.
Um, do you know Sarah Waters' Tipping the Velvet?
No.
Tipping the Velvet is a similar sort of time period set on like the vaudeville circuit,
Okay.
lesbian romance in And it's the same sort of thing where it's like a fantasy version of the past,
Okay.
which I think mine is not that, but it's also like I'm going to try and be as accurate as I can, but at the heart of it, I'm trying to tell a story about a person coming to terms with their own identity.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. So in terms of research, you said you've done a lot more research. In terms of it's your fourth draft. So did you rewrite it or did you revise it?
I rewrote a lot of it. I added a lot. It's somewhere around 90,000 words at the moment. It was
Okay.
50,000 this time last year.
So
Because I just realized I hadn't. Go ahead.
you almost did a NaNoWriMo last, like in addition to the NaNoWriMo sentence.
Exactly. I just was like, there's not enough space in here. There's not enough time for these characters to sort of come to terms with what they're feeling and understand it and go on like the emotional journeys that they need to go on. So yeah, it just sort of I didn't add on to the end. I just sort of like expanded the whole thing and filled in the gaps.
That makes sense. Do you have a process for writing right now? I know you said you added in the gaps and everything. When it comes to the writing itself, like the mechanical putting the words on the computer, well, first of all, do you use the computer or do you sometimes write longhand and then put it on the computer? Like what is your writing process?
I use the computer. Just recently this sort of last round of edits this year, I started using Scrivener.
Okay.
So I can like move things around, which was really important. Initially, I just sort of wrote and wrote and wrote in chronological order, and I plan as well, sort of general structure. But this time, because I knew like, oh, let's say chapter 24, we are not ready for that yet. We've moved too fast. Something is emotionally not where it needs to be. I need to add a scene for this character to experience a certain type of growth. So that needs to slot in there. So I did a lot of moving things around, and I did a lot of at one particularly frustrating point, I got a bunch of index cards and color coded different. This is a friendship journey. This is a career journey moment, like the different aspects of the characters' lives that needed to develop. And I laid them out on the floor and I started moving things around.
Did that work?
And just panicked.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it worked. I think it worked. I'm happier with it now than I was before I did that.
So it worked. So I think if you're happier with it, that's definitely when you're no longer panicking, I think it's good.
Yeah, when I'm like, it doesn't work. Now it's closer to working.
It's interesting that you already have this, because I know I still sometimes in prior books, when you have that feeling that something doesn't work, but you're not quite sure what doesn't work, and you try and you try and you try and you still don't figure out. Like it has happened to me. It was not a big one. It was not a big moment where it was like a big plot moment, but a tiny plot moment, which I know didn't really work, but it worked at the same time. So when you were reading it, it was fine. But in my gut, there was this thing about, is it really right? And then usually what would happen is I would send it to my critic partners and they would be like, so that's not working. I'm like, shoot, I thought maybe I could pass by it.
You just sneak it in.
I know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my gut feeling, maybe it's wrong, but it was not. So I think like the fact that you're able to figure out to the point of where you don't have that little nagging voice that said, that's not quite right. That's not. Because I think sometimes you can also be like a perfectionist when you're writing, and at some point you do have to let it go. But when you hear that voice, sometimes I feel like we have to listen to it before we do let it go.
Yeah. I think I don't know if this was another question you were going to ask, but that's where I'm at right now. And what I'm struggling with is I've written this thing 4 times or, 4 deepenings of it. And I don't know how to know when it's done. That's where I am right now.
I wish somebody would tell me. Like, so for me, it's more, I think it's, since I'm self-publishing, and that's another question we'll get into too. Like, what are your projects with that novel? But since I'm self-publishing, at some point I put a deadline, and once that deadline, as long as I'm happy with the final product, and my readers, my critic partners are like, they're like, okay, it's fine. Like, you need to let it go. I think as long as it's not a feeling where I'm missing something in it, where it's not, and it then I have a moment. I usually have when I'm done with a book and I'm really done with a book, I usually have a moment where I'm like, oh yes, it's done. It's good. I can't do anything anymore. But as you may know, even for Fear Me Not, before I sent it to you, I ended up rechanging like just a few things because I'm kind of like, well, I've used terms that, and it was about mental illness. And I remember I used the word crazy more often in the past. And I'm much more mindful now of using different words for that. And so I've been trying to be more mindful of that. And when I gave it to you for the audiobook, I'm like, well, that's an opportunity for me to make sure that the words that I'm not using as much in my writing do not make it to the audiobook. So I ended up scrapping some of those, and it was like maybe 4 or 5, and it was not a lot, but I still had. And then in another one I added, because you know how to sing so well, I added a part in See Me Not, just so that I could have you singing again. And you actually made the book stronger that way, because it gives another scene where Tessa is able to like experience a growth, as you were talking about before, like coming to term with something else. And I had that in the book before, but I didn't have it as fleshed out as I do now, thanks to your singing. So I think for me, it's kind of like, as long as you look back, you'll still want to change things. I do not change things anymore. If I like, unless there was something harmful, then I would definitely change it. But if it's not, and if it's just something that I think like, oh, I could have done that one sentence better, like I'm just letting, once it's out, unless again I do the audiobook, and then I have the opportunity to make sure that what I put out there is even better in a way than what I had in writing. And some people might be listening and like, oh, we should get the audiobook because it's even better than the book. And I'm like, yes, you will help both me and Megan, so go ahead.
Yes. Can I ask you a question?
Sure. Now I'm
How do you pick people to be your critic partners to read your books?
I was lucky that I was going to say growing up as a writer, which in a way that was growing up as a writer. I mean, I was already in my 20s, but there was this website called yahighway.com. And so we had they were organizing a lot of blog hopping at the time. So we had like Road Trip Wednesday, and we had all those things where Road Trip Wednesday had like a question and everybody would answer the same question, and you would hop from blog to blog reading people's answer and commenting. And that way, I actually got to meet most of my critic partners today. We just started chatting on blog comments from week to week. And then people were also blogging about their lives. So you got to know about, them on a more personal level a little bit. Like basically blogging was like the Instagram but in more detail, because people were actually writing more, I think, than in the caption. And then there was Twitter, and then you were connecting like this. So that's, for me, that's how I met, I want to say, pretty much all my critic partners. And we just started talking more and more. And then I remember writing, I think I still remember the email, like, would you be my critic partner or something, that I wrote to one of my friends who lived in Canada and I lived in Germany. And she replied yes, and then we exchanged manuscripts. And so that's the way I started with critic partners. When it comes to critic partners, I think professional associations are like the best place to go. The libraries, because they have sometimes writing groups. So like if you have, especially because in London right now things are reopening.
Yeah, just today we went into a new step of reopening. So I think I can go to the library now.
Yeah, so libraries, sometimes they may have, if you want, because sometimes having, like, I do most of my critiquing and I get my stuff mostly critic from people who are out of state. So I've always had people who are pretty far away in terms of like geographically far away from me. But sometimes if you like to have people who are closer and having writing sessions, which is also like sometimes I need to get into that too once COVID stops, so that having people to physically write with is also something I'm looking forward to doing more. So, and I think local libraries for that can be
That's a great
helpful.
idea. I should look into that.
Have the Maryland Romance Writers group, who I know does sometimes write-ins, or they also do online writings. Even if you can't make it necessarily, then you might be able to even join, even back in the States, if you have like a writers group from a certain area, and then you might,
connect with people that way too.
Smart.
For the critic partners, like you want to make sure for the critic partners that you're on the same page for what you want in terms of feedback, because if you're somebody who would get overwhelmed by line to line feedback, then I think you need to make clear that no, you just want big picture feedback at the beginning. You don't want line by line feedback. You don't want comments like every 2 lines about either because it's great or it's not something they would like, or like, you don't necessarily want line editing. You just want big picture
and
feedback.
That's my main concern right now is pacing. So that's exactly what I would want. And I would want someone to read the whole thing. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's basically then like, I think it would be more about, okay, well, this is what I need. Can you do this? How long would you need to do that? So that you're on the same page too in terms of timeline. Because if you're asking somebody who might like be super happy to do it, but they'll do it within 3 months and you want feedback much faster, then you're not going to be, I think it's all about, I say that a lot. It's something I've learned in communications about expectations. Like, I think expectations are so important for everything you do, also professionally, personally, and also professionally. Like, because critic partners, I think, are a godsend. It's not a godsend, it's a godsend, but it's gold. So I would say it's golden. There you go. Personally, I learn a lot from them, from both critiquing and getting my work critiqued. So
that's a good point. I think I've learned about writing from narrating, because I sit here and read books, not all day, but a good chunk of the day.
And I think like the fact that you're acting them out must make it even more of a learning process than just reading it, because you have to give life to those characters and you're kind of like, well, okay, this is how she's done it and she's done that right. Or, oh, that's like not giving it what I thought should be given at that moment. Maybe I would have needed a bit quicker here. Like you can feel that, I think, when you're acting it.
And if I'm just reading a book, I read really fast. So I might miss pacing. Whereas if I'm saying it out loud, pacing becomes so clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't thank you, but I don't know
no,
if that's
helpful.
Like okay, good. So what are your current goals? Because I know goals sometimes ebb and flow. So what is your current goal with your project?
Currently, I'm thinking I would like to try traditional publishing first. I'm not taking any steps right now towards that, because once I decide, if I ever decide it's done, it's ready, then I'll start looking into literary agents and all that. I'm not completely closed to the idea of self-publishing, especially because if I self-publish, that then would make it much easier for me to narrate the audiobook myself. But I'm thinking about traditional publishing as an attempt, first of all.
Prior to this episode, I've asked you what 3 words come to mind when you think about writing. And you've mentioned voice, flow, and core. And I will play the words right now.
Hi, my name is Megan Carter, and I'm an actor and audiobook narrator who also writes. My background is mostly in performance, specifically stage work and classical theater, but I've dabbled in writing in lots of different genres, from podcast and storytelling to stage plays to stand-up comedy. I've written a one-woman show based on the Greek myth of Medea, which I've performed parts of in workshop settings, and I've also recently finished a 4th draft of my first novel. When I think of writing, the 3 words that come to mind are voice, flow, and core. Talk to you soon.
So why did you choose those words?
It's so interesting because I feel like every day I feel differently about writing, and I can remember why I picked 2 of those words, but I can't remember why I picked the 3rd one. Voice, I've touched on a little. I think it's helped me hugely to learn just to read it out loud. That's a 2-parter, actually. One is the act of speaking and making sure that the dialogue works as if 2 people were saying it out loud. And the other one is just like being able to say yes to my inner voice, because it's so easy to let your sort of self-deprecating thoughts get in the way of writing. And that connects with flow as well, because if you have this voice in the back of your head saying, oh, this is not very good, like you need to do something, just stop writing, you're not good enough, you're never going to do it then. And so you have to just be able to say, that voice needs to stop. I need to listen to the voice that's helpful for me in this moment, which is the voice of the characters and the story. Just let it flow. Core. Why did I say core?
I'm gonna have to re-listen, but I'm pretty sure I wrote that
No,
right.
I remember saying it. But why did I say it? I think, well, now this might be not what I had in mind at the time, but remembering the core of this story that you're wanting to tell. And this is the problem that I'm having with pacing right now is, am I telling too many stories at once? And what is important, you know?
I know, and I think, I mean, it fits. I don't know if that's what you meant, but I think it fits. I was thinking when you started talking about the different stories, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because you're trying to tell the coming of age and romance story, and what subplots do you have in that book, and that, is that too much? Is that not enough? Are they all coming together? Is that just, yeah.
I think that's probably what I meant.
Well, that sounds good, and that seems to fit. So for me, that's probably what you meant.
Great.
So if you're thinking in the future about looking for an agent and traditionally publishing, then what three words come to mind for that?
Well, the first word that's come to mind is doubt, which isn't promising, but I mean that connects to what I was just saying about voice. Like, that's always going to be present. It's just, you have to learn, like, is this doubt because I know in my heart that it's actually not ready? Or is this doubt no longer serving me, and do I just need to go for it?
I think at every stage of your writing career, the doubt always seeps in.
Yeah.
And I think I can ask, and it's all about, right? It's not only in the writing career, it's probably in life too, right? Like, you can be as successful as you can, and then suddenly you're going to have a doubt. Like, if I'm looking back and talking to people who've had several books published, some doubt that they will ever get published again because they currently don't have a book under contract. Some doubt that if they're New York Times bestsellers, some doubt they will ever hit the list again. And is that the height of their career? And that's it. And then sometimes it's about reframing, right? So for that New York Times bestsellers author who hit it once, for example, does that mean really the end of the career when they don't hit it again? No, because they might even sometimes sell more books and not end up on the New York Times bestseller list. Like, this is not necessarily a reflection of, first of all, the amount of readers you have. And the list is curated. So it's not, it's a great honor. It's great, but it's not necessarily the end of it all. If you do not hit it again, then I think it's just the publisher, right? What does that mean for the publisher? Does that mean they still put as much marketing into you, or they don't? And then if they don't, what can you do in terms of your writing career for yourself to be successful within your own parameters that you set for yourself? And so when it comes to doubt, right, when you're talking about your doubt, which is totally understandable. Like, I have doubts about my writing. First, am I ever going to finish this revision that I've been talking about for months? Like, yes, I will.
Yeah.
I know I will, but I doubt it from time to time. Like, am I ever going to really put the end word where I'm actually, like you, satisfied with the story and I'm able to let it go? Because I've been revising this story for a very long time now.
Yeah.
And it's usually not my process. So I usually revise it a lot, but sometimes it doesn't take me as much as it's taking me right now. And then the doubt about, will I ever, make a living out of my writing, which is currently not the case. And it's everybody, but then for yourself, right? If we go back to you not knowing if your work is done and everything, and then finding an agent, I think by the time you'll be looking for an agent, you'll be ready with your book, because anyways, you should not be looking for an agent before you finish writing and being happy with it. So maybe that word will change then. So I'm asking right now from like a very difficult point of view, because you're currently doubting the pacing and all those things. So of course, if you think about literary agent and everything, you'd be like, doubt, because I'm not even sure if my story is done. So thank you, Elodie, for asking me this very nice question. This was not a trick, I promise.
No, I didn't think that it was. I'm really interested now because I'm not done and I haven't really looked into anything beyond getting my story onto not a page, but a screen. But I've never thought so much about how, like, writing from the business side, from the career side, is so much like acting. As in, you want to find an agent that's right for you. Same with acting. It's so much, many young actors have pressure to just get signed, when actually if you sign with the wrong agent, that's probably worse than having no agent at all. And this thing of like, oh, well, if you're not on the New York Times bestsellers list, oh, if you don't win an Oscar, then this is so, it's all the same. And the thing of, it's a career that lots and lots of people want to do, and it's just statistically not going to happen. So like everyone thinks that they have a story to tell. Obviously, everyone has a story to tell, but everyone thinks they can write a book. Everyone thinks they can be in a movie. Well, statistically, no. And you have to get up every day and say, I'm trying to do this thing that's really hard. And you have to just sort of believe. Ugh, so cheesy. You just have to believe and just keep trying. Oh God, it's so cheesy, but it's the same. It's the exact same in acting. Like, I'm an actor in London and I want to do Shakespeare. Thousands of actors in London that want to do Shakespeare. And somehow I get up and go to my audition, and 99 auditions out of 100 you're not going to get, but you have to find it. You have to find what makes you want to keep doing it and just keep pushing forward.
I think there's a lot, and it's not cheesy per se, because I think it's and I don't know what cheesy per se is. I guess it's cheese, but it's also, I think, finding what your goals are in terms of like, what are the manageable goals that are in your what are in your power, right? What is it that you can write the best book that you can write, and you can do this and you can do that, and that's in your power. And then it's about the not giving up if you want an agent and being traditionally published, and that's really what you want to do. It's always funny to hear about those overnight successes that are not overnight successes. Even sometimes authors that are putting out their 4th books and they've finally got, I don't know, a lot of readers out of that 4th books. Well, sometimes people are like, oh, that's their 1st book. No, they have 3 books that are already published, just nobody really knew about them. And then they become this overnight success. And then the manageable part is getting somewhat manageable, is getting the words on the page. And doing that. And then finding a way to, and that's going to be my turn to sound cheesy, but find a way to then be happy with what you have in front of you, but also striving to do more for what your maybe unattainable goals are.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't know. It's the philosophy of writing. So you said doubt. Do you have any other 2 words about publishing that?
I was hoping you'd forget the other 2 words. No. Well, luck is going to play a part, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Luck. Yeah.
And I was going to say timing. That goes in with luck, doesn't it? But it's exactly like you say. I can control what I put on the page. I can control how I write my, what's it called, a query letter?
Yeah.
But I can't control what kind of mood they're in when it hits their inbox. It's all these things. And just sort of remembering that I've done what I can. I've written a book that I'm presumably, by the time I'm sending it to agents, proud of. Oh, okay, control. The word is control. I've controlled what I can, and I have to put it out in the universe.
I mean, it's very like, it's people also forget sometimes that when it comes to agents. So yes, they might, because then, not to like, I'm gonna go deep into like the next step after the agenting, but when you're on submission, so yeah, you got your agent and then they're submitting it to publishing houses. I've heard, because when you're a writer who's not yet agented, the agent seems like the big goal to attain. Once you have
step
the agent, you're good. But it's only step 1. But the control part, I think, what you can control, and then letting go, that's why we go back to cheesy, letting go to what you cannot control.
And that's just the pattern in my whole life. That's a lesson I need to learn.
Well, for acting, I mean, it's even like words, you're already putting yourself out there. And we were talking last week with Katie about vulnerability. I still cannot say that word. How when you put on the page, like to some extent, it feels like a part of you. And that's why it's so also hard to sometimes, like, all the doubts that you get about what you're writing. Is it because it's also a little bit part of you? And so is it going the right way? Is it too much blah, blah, blah? But it's also not you. It's really not. It's just a story you're telling. And I think that sometimes it's this extra step of letting your book go is just detaching yourself a little bit from the story at the time. But as an actor, you actually put yourself like physically in front of people who judge you all the time.
That's what was so scary about the one woman show, is they can judge the writing and they can judge the performance, and it's all me.
But, yeah, I can see that. That's
At
a
least
lot.
with the novel, if someone reads it, I don't have to watch their face while they do it.
Exactly. You don't have to, and do not read the reviews.
Oh God.
Everybody will tell you, do not. I still do, but do not. So one last question. What is one writing moment that you had either with that book? Like, which one made you, that whenever you think of it, you smile?
I think it's not the novels, actually. It's the one woman show. When I performed that 15-minute chunk, it was at a sort of new works night, and the tone generally of those things can be quite comedic. So I was sort of like, I don't know, not many people do monologues at them, and not many people do sort of serious subject matter. So I had no idea how it was going to be received. And I didn't know if it was good. It was sort of like poetic. It was just not the vibe of the evening. And I went back into the audience after, because it was all, very casual. I took my seat to watch the next one, and people around me were like, what? How did you, like, they were concerned, like, why did you choose to write about this? But also, like, it was people thought it felt affected by it. And that was really nice. That was the goal. So
that does. And any chance you're going to put this online at some point, like on YouTube? Or
the plan for that was potentially fringe festivals, and I'm not closed off to that. But the next step for that one would be find some money, hire a choreographer, and work through the more physical staging, movementy side of it, and then bring the words back and then put the whole thing together. That's a long-term goal, though.
That's what you were talking about at the beginning, about how you were looking for a choreographer. So you're still thinking about that particular project. Like, this is still something that could happen in the near future.
Yeah, I think so. I think having done sort of independent work for this past year, doing audiobooks, and so some voiceover stuff has been independent, I'm really looking forward to being just given a script and being in a room with other actors and stepping away from the solo work, because audiobooks are solo work as well.
Yeah.
But it's really common for actors, if they're not booking things, well, what are you writing? What of your own are you creating that you're not waiting for someone to cast you? So I think it's really good to have sort of a project on the go that I can come back to in slow periods.
Well, looking forward to seeing you on the screen and to hearing your audiobooks and to reading your words. Like, this is just... So again, Megan, thank you so much. We're like talking so much that I could not end this conversation. So I'm just going to end it that way. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, for the giveaway, I'll give the information in a few seconds. So don't stay tuned for the information on the giveaway that I'm going to repeat from the introduction that I'll record in a few days, but you're going to hear it a day later, whatever it is. Again, the time wrap. And thank you for narrating my audiobooks. I'm glad I met you that way. And let's keep in touch for the critic partner thing. And if anybody listening has any other ideas or is interested in critiquing Megan's work or learning more about it, don't hesitate to write me an email at author.elodie.novodatsky.com and OWODSDOGAZKIJ@gmail.com, and I will forward the information to Megan.
Thanks, Elodie.
Well, I guess Plato wanted to say thank you for listening. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget that I have a giveaway running where you could win an audiobook copy of Fear Me, Fear Me Not, See Me, See Me Not, or Summer Like No Other. Fear Me Not, and See Me Not. This is for residents of the United States and the United Kingdom, and A Summer Like No Other will be for anybody, I think, in the world. Please don't forget to hit the little follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast provider, streaming platform, and to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It truly, truly helps. Thank you again so much, and happy writing if you're a writer, and everyone, happy reading.